He was the fastest man in the world, the invincible champion, the icon who faced giants. But when he saw a child, the warrior transformed. The punches disappeared, laughter took their place, and the ring gave way to something far more powerful: innocence. Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest boxer in history, he was also a man who knew how to laugh at his own shadow. Amidst the crowds that followed him, amidst flashbulbs and microphones, there was always a moment when he forgot the weight of fame. A moment when he would kneel before a child, make a face, tell a silly joke, and laugh like there was no tomorrow. It was in these moments that the real Ali appeared, not the idol, but the human being. Children adored him. When he entered a gymnasium or walked down a street, the little ones would run toward him, their eyes shining, and instead of rushing past, he would stop, pretending to fight. He would fake a knockout. He would deliberately let himself fall. He would laugh out loud, hug, and let them touch his fists and his medals. For many, it was just a game. For him, it was a mission. Children are the future, he would say. If I make one of them smile today, maybe tomorrow the world will be a better place. Behind his bravado in the ring lay a man who understood the power of laughter. Between grueling training sessions and battles for justice, Ali found time to be silly, to poke fun at himself, to clown around, to pretend a punch of air knocked him out. His simple jokes, full of charm and rhythm, had the same impact as his punches. They made the audience roar, but now, with joy. Today's video reveals this largely unknown side of the champion. The Ali who joked, who laughed, who hid behind humor to spread love. A man who, even amidst pain and political struggles, never forgot the boy within. It was a warm morning in Louisville, Kentucky. The sun reflected off the sidewalks as if the entire neighborhood were shrouded in liquid gold. Muhammad Ali, already world-renowned, walked with his broad smile, a group of reporters following him like shadows. But suddenly, the champion stopped. Across the street, a group of children played ball barefoot, laughing loudly, running through puddles. Ali watched for a moment and then, without warning, crossed the street. Silence fell over the press. The man who had faced monsters in the ring now approached a group of 9- and 10-year-old boys as if he were one of them. "Who's the king here?" he shouted, with that theatrical tone everyone recognized. The children looked at each other, confused. A little boy in a torn shirt answered, "You are the king, Ali." He laughed out loud, pretending to be angry. "Wrong. Today, the king is whoever can overthrow me." What happened next was pure magic. The man who had conquered the world began chasing the children like a playful giant, stumbling on purpose, feigning exhaustion, and letting himself fall to the grass. The children climbed on him, screamed, and laughed incessantly. He made faces, mimed slow punches, raised his fists, and said in a serious voice, "Don't make me use my secret move." The laughter was universal. Within minutes, the world champion became the street's favorite clown. That episode, which many captured in photos and memories, would be repeated hundreds of times throughout his life. Ali had a seemingly inexhaustible energy when it came to entertaining children. He said that children saw what adults couldn't. They see the heart, not the fame, and perhaps that was why he felt so comfortable around them. There was no judgment, only curiosity. They saw him not as the man who challenged governments and racists, but as the funny giant who rhymed about butterflies and bees. At public events, it was common to see him interrupt an interview to joke with a boy in the crowd. Once, during a press conference in New York, he noticed a girl in the corner of the room, holding a doll and looking shy. In the middle of a serious political answer, Ali stopped, looked at her, and said, "Hey, you know what the doll said to me, that she wants to fight for the world title." The audience burst into laughter. He knelt on the floor, pretended to talk to the doll, and for a few minutes the world forgot that there was a man persecuted for his convictions, just a symbolic father playing with a child. Ali deeply believed that humor healed. Once, during a visit to a children's hospital, a boy with cancer said he was afraid of dying. He responded calmly and with a gentle smile, "You're not going to die now, champ. You still have to grow up to beat me in the ring." The boy laughed, and Ali pretended to fall out of bed, defeated. The entire room erupted in joy. Nurses wept silently. He knew how to use jokes as a shield against pain, and in that moment, the fight was no longer against a gloved opponent, but against fear. Behind all that humor lay a philosophy. He said that laughter was a form of resistance, a way to keep your soul light when the world tried to crush you. And perhaps that was what made him so human, because while many heroes hide behind glory, Ali hid behind a joke, not out of cowardice, but because he understood that joy was also a powerful weapon. At the end of that day in Louisville, as the Sun began to set and the children headed home. Ollie sat there on the sidewalk, sweaty and smiling. A photographer approached and asked, "Why do you waste your time with them, Ollie? You're a legend." He replied simply, "Because one day I was one of them too, and I never want to forget what it's like to feel small in the face of the world." And it was at that moment that the champion unleashed his most powerful blow, not the uppercut, not the straight, but laughter. A laughter capable of shattering the weight of fame, prejudice, pain, and loneliness. And perhaps that's why Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest fighter on the planet, but the greatest joker of the human heart. He laughed at everything, but when the cameras went dark, silence surrounded him, because even the man who made the world smile also carried wounds that laughter couldn't heal. At first glance, Muhammad Ali seemed invincible. The way he walked, talked, and looked made the world believe nothing could shake him. But behind his bright smile and sharp witticisms lay a man who also felt the weight of fear, loneliness, and injustice. Humor was his disguise, an invisible armor against the pain that not even boxing could erase. When the public saw him making jokes, imitating opponents, or rhyming about his victories, they never imagined that this was in fact a way of survival, a shield against the world that tried to break him every day. That in the 1970s, during the height of his career, Ali faced battles that went far beyond the ring. He had refused to fight in the Vietnam War, saying, "No Viet Cong ever called me nigger." This powerful and courageous statement made him an enemy of the American government. He was banned from boxing, stripped of his world title, and banned from fighting for 3 years. 3 years of silence, frustration, and pent-up rage. But even then, he smiled. In interviews, he joked with reporters, joked about being forced retired, imitated generals and politicians with a comical irony that made people laugh. But those who knew him closely knew, every laugh was a way of saying, "I'm still standing." One of his closest friends, photographer and confidant Howard Bingham, once recounted how Ollie used humor to transform pain into hope. When creditors knocked on his door, he would greet them with a smile and say, "Take it easy, boy. The champ is only training to pay you back with interest." When he couldn't afford the electricity, he would light candles and tell his wife, "Tonight is romantic in the king's palace." It was impossible not to laugh, even when life seemed to be falling apart. He didn't deny his suffering, he simply faced it differently by laughing at it. And it was this same spirit he brought to children. During a period of suspension from fighting, Ali began visiting schools and hospitals, often unannounced. He would arrive in his simple clothes, and the students, in disbelief, would watch the world champion enter their classrooms. He would imitate teachers, make jokes about math, pretend to be a troublemaker, and in the end, he would say, "I've fought the greatest in the world." But the hardest fight is believing in yourself. Every laugh he provoked was a blow to discouragement, a victory over prejudice. On one such visit, a boy asked Ali, "Why do you always smile, even when people talk badly about you?" He replied, staring at the boy, "Because if I stop smiling, they win." That phrase stuck in the minds of everyone there. Ollie's laughter wasn't naive, it was resilience. It was his way of remaining human in a world that tried to make him a symbol. And even when he returned to the ring after 3 years away, humor remained a staple of his arsenal. During training, he made his teammates laugh with improvised jokes, mocked reporters, and recited rhymes as if they were war hymns. Before his fight against George Foreman in 1974, in the legendary Rumble in the Jungle, he taunted his opponent with a phrase that became legendary: "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." The audience laughed, but there was a strategy behind it. Humor disarmed the enemy, broke the tension, and restored emotional control. But Ollie's laughter also hid something deeper. At night, away from the cameras, he spent hours reflecting on the weight of being who he was. The man who made the world smile also wondered if he was being fair to his own soul. He had faith, believed in God and justice, but sometimes, silently, he confessed to his closest friends that he feared he wasn't ready for so much love and so much pain. It was there, in the solitude of his room, that the clown took off his mask and the warrior returned to being just Cassius, the boy from Louisville who dreamed of being someone. Humor kept him going. It was the breath of lightness amidst the chaos, the link that connected him to others. He knew that laughter had the power to heal and that a good joke could make the world stop hating for a moment. So he used it as a weapon and as a cure. And at a time when the world was attacking him, when many wanted to see him humiliated, Ollie responded with irony and love. "You can take away my titles, but you will never take away my smile." And they didn't. If you believe laughter can also be a form of struggle like this video now, subscribe to the channel and comment, when was the time humor saved you from a difficult moment? Because, like Ollie, we all have a ring to fight in, and sometimes the most powerful blow is a simple smile. And to help us continue uncovering these real stories and improving the quality of our content, consider purchasing our ebook. You'll find the direct link in the first link in the description. Your support makes all the difference. But one day, the body that made the world vibrate began to fail, and the laughter, once spontaneous, became a painful reminder that even boxing gods grow old. The years passed, and the man who once moved like a swift shadow began to feel the weight of time. Muhammad Ali, the invincible giant, noticed that his hands were shaking, that his speech no longer came as clearly as before, that his body responded more slowly than his mind. The diagnosis came like an invisible blow: Parkinson's disease. It was the kind of adversary you couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't knock out. But, as always, Ali chose to face him with the same fighting spirit and with the same smile that had accompanied him since childhood. When the news spread, the entire world was shocked. Many expected the champion to retreat, to stop appearing in public. But Ali, true to his nature, did the opposite. Instead of hiding, he presented himself to the world with humility and courage. When he trembled in interviews, he would say, "Look, now my hands dance without my command." And everyone laughed. He was the one who transformed tragedy into comedy, fear into strength. No one laughed at him, but with him. This was his power to master even suffering with the lightness of someone who understood the value of laughter. In 1996, when he was invited to light the Olympic torch in Atlanta, many doubted he could do it, but Ali appeared. The flame flickered, and so did his hand. The audience, expecting tears, found a smile, a shy, hesitant, but genuine smile. It was the smile of resilience, the same one he showed to children, now in front of billions of people. That moment became a global symbol of resilience. Even weakened, he silenced the entire planet not with a punch, but with a flame trembling in his hands. But away from the cameras, the struggle was different. Parkinson's robbed him of the small gestures that had always defined his charisma. Friends said he would sometimes spend hours trying to tie his shoelaces, chuckling to himself at his own slowness. The champion lost to the shoe, he would say, and laugh. It was as if humor was his final line of defense. When the disease knocked him down, he would say, "The ground only knocked me down because it wanted an autograph." When his voice faltered, he would imitate himself, whispering ironically, "Look, the man who talked too much has finally learned to be quiet." Even with his speech impaired, Ali never stopped visiting hospitals, schools, and institutions. He understood that his presence, even silent, still communicated hope. Children would surround him, some curious about the tremor in his hands, and he would say, "My body is just dancing before me," and they would laugh. In those moments, the champion ceased to be a distant legend and became a living example of humanity, someone who showed that weakness can also be noble, that laughter is still possible even when the body fades. One of the most moving episodes occurred at a charity event in 2002. A boy with cerebral palsy was brought to him. The boy was trembling, barely able to speak. When he stood before Ali, he tried to smile. The champion embraced him and, pointing to himself, said slowly, "We are equals." Then he grimaced, pretended he couldn't lift his arm, and let the boy push his fist, simulating victory. The cameras captured the scene, but what no one captured was the gleam in Ollie's eyes at that moment, a look of recognition, of someone who saw in another child the same fighting spirit. Ollie's laughter, now quieter, had deepened. It was no longer just a joke. It was a way of challenging fate. When asked how he felt, he would reply, "Happy, because I'm still here to laugh about it." This phrase became his mantra. He knew that humor didn't heal the body, but it healed the soul. And even trembling, even tired, he still found the energy to play with the world at home with his wife Lonnie. He often joked about his condition. When he dropped a glass, he'd say, "Blame it on the Louisville earthquake." When he forgot something, he'd look up at the ceiling and say, "My brain's taking a vacation." Laughter kept the man the world loved alive, and perhaps that's what kept him from being consumed by illness. But there were times when the silence weighed heavily. Sometimes, alone, he would watch his old fights on television and see that young, agile, invincible body. It was like watching someone else. Even so, he smiled, because he understood that the true champion wasn't the one who knocked others down, but the one who remained standing when everything tried to knock him down. And so, even as his body crumbled, Ollie's spirit remained intact, vibrant. The man who once laughed with children now laughed with his own pain. And each smile was a victory, small, silent, but powerful. But the final battle was yet to come. Because when the voice began to fade, the whole world realized that the man who had always spoken with thunder would now teach something even more profound: the power of silence. As the years passed, silence began to take the place once filled with sharp words and witty rhymes. The man who dominated the microphone with phrases that made crowds vibrate now spoke little, sometimes only with his eyes. But Muhammad Ali's gaze still spoke more than any speech. It was as if he had understood that time had disarmed him of everything except his soul, and deep down, that silence wasn't weakness. It was a new form of power. As Parkinson's progressed, Ali's visits became rarer but also more symbolic. He could no longer take the stage, but his mere presence brought the audience to their feet in prolonged applause. At events, he was led by his wife Lonnie, always with their hands clasped, and when he arrived, the silence turned to reverence. People knew they were before a living legend, a man who fought not only with his fists, but with his heart. Many wept just at the sight of him, and he, even without speaking, smiled with his eyes, as if to say, "I'm still here, and I can still love." It was curious to observe how the world interpreted this new Ali. Before, he enchanted with words, now with slow gestures and almost imperceptible expressions. When he greeted a child, his fingers trembled, but his tenderness remained firm. When a fan cried in front of him, he simply touched his forehead to theirs, a small but devastating gesture. It was as if he transmitted strength through contact, as if silently saying what he had always believed: love is the only fight worth fighting. During the 2000s, Ali became an almost spiritual presence. He visited mosques, participated in humanitarian causes, and championed peace with the same fervor with which he once championed titles. Despite his difficulty expressing himself, he insisted on being present. At a conference on racial equality in 2004, he slowly stood up, supported by two men. He grabbed the microphone with effort and tried to speak, but no sound came out. The entire audience stood still. Then he raised his fist, the same fist that once shook the world, and smiled. He didn't need words. The message was clear: I'm still fighting. His closest friends said that, even in silence, Ali never lost his sense of humor. Sometimes, when someone spoke too close to his ear, he would whisper with difficulty, "Don't shout, I'm not dead yet." Everyone laughed, and he laughed along, a fragile but lively laugh. It was his way of remembering that laughter was still a flame that Parkinson's couldn't extinguish. At home, days were simple. There, he liked to watch the sunrise through the window while Lonnie made coffee. He would point to the sky and make hand signals, as if silently reciting his old rhymes. Every now and then, one of his sons would sit beside him and show him old videos, the fights, the taunts, the jokes. The champion would chuckle quietly, shaking his head, and sometimes write in a shaky notebook, "I'm still the greatest." But there was a new sweetness in his personality. The man who had once defied kings and presidents now became a fatherly, almost sacred figure. He welcomed everyone who visited him with the same serene gaze, as if each person were a child asking for advice. "Don't be afraid of life," he wrote slowly. "Be afraid of not living." These simple phrases, written in crooked letters, spread throughout the world like small spiritual treasures. The wisdom of a man who learned that silence can be more powerful than any scream. When the world paid tribute to him for the last time in life, Ali was already speaking with gestures and glances. On stage, he didn't need to open his mouth. All he had to do was raise his hand and flash that signature smile, the same one that once enchanted children, fans, rivals, and even enemies. The entire stadium rose to its feet. Applause echoed for minutes. Many said they had never felt so much energy in such a quiet moment. It was as if the entire universe bowed before a man who had won the ultimate fight. To remain human, even when his body no longer responded, and there, before the world, Muhammad Ali delivered his most profound blow. Not an empty silence, but one filled with meaning, an echo of all he had been. The champion who once roared now whispered through the memories of millions. And, ironically, it was in this silence that his voice became eternal. But the fight wasn't over yet. Because when his body finally rested, Ali's spirit didn't fade. It spread throughout the world, in the laughter of children, the smiles of the sick, and the faith of those who believe that even silence can be a cry of love. When Muhammad Ali passed away, the world stopped, but not in silence. Instead, with applause, smiles, and tears all mingled. His death wasn't the end. It was the echo of a life that taught that laughter is also courage. Thousands gathered in Louisville to bid farewell to the man who transformed boxing into art and humor into a shield. The procession was filled with flags, children dressed in white colorful balloons, and a light energy in the air as if everyone knew the champion was still there, laughing in some way. Ali had left something much greater than belts, a human legacy. He showed that true power lies not in bringing down enemies, but in lifting people up. In schools, his name became synonymous with hope. In hospitals, his jokes continue to be told by nurses who saw him play with patients. In every corner of the planet, there is someone who repeats his words. If I make one child smile today, tomorrow the world will be a better place. Even after his illness, after his silence, Ali never ceased to inspire. His smile, trembling but sincere, taught that life is worthwhile even when it hurts. He transformed weakness into faith, pain into laughter, and the end into eternity. And so, the man who once floated like a butterfly and stung like a bee departed lightly, leaving behind a trail of humanity. Because Muhammad Ali wasn't just the greatest fighter in the world, he was the man who proved that laughter can also be a form of fighting. Time passes. Heroes pass. But there are laughs that never die. Muhammad Ali's laugh is one of the myth echoes in every child who dreams, in every person who faces pain with ease. He taught us that being strong isn't about hitting harder, but about smiling even when everything hurts. And that's why, even outside the ring, he remains undefeated.